Have you ever imagined a culture that completely defies everything we consider normal? A group that rejects social conventions, faces death head-on, and lives among crematoriums? The Aghoris monks are one of the most enigmatic sects in the world, carrying beliefs and practices that challenge both logic and humanity's deepest taboos. They meditate, eat, sleep, and even engage in sex among burning corpses in open-air cremation grounds. They walk naked, consume human flesh, use skulls as bowls, and smoke marijuana. They emerge from their isolated existence only during the Kumbh Mela, the largest Hindu festival, which takes place in 4 different locations in India, rotating every 12 years. In the sacred city of Varanasi, where the cycle of life and death unfolds before the eyes of thousands of pilgrims and devotees, these monks walk among the living and the dead, seeking enlightenment through the absolute acceptance of all that exists. To them, there is no difference between pure and impure, sacred and profane. Unlike most Hindu traditions, which strive to avoid impurities in pursuit of liberation, the Aghoris embrace what many shun: corpses, human ashes, and rituals that shock the vast majority. But what drives someone to follow this path? What lies behind the beliefs and rituals that both fascinate and terrify? Are these monks merely social provocateurs, or are they true spiritual seekers who have found a way to transcend humanity's deepest fears? That's what you're about to discover here on World No Filter. Want to embark on a journey full of discoveries, curiosities, and surprising content? Subscribe to our channel by clicking here and never miss a video. On this journey, we'll explore the origins, rituals, and philosophy of the Aghoris, as well as understand how this extreme sect fits into India's spiritual and social context. Get ready for an immersion into a world where fear and repulsion are merely illusions that stand in the way of true freedom. The philosophy of the Aghoris is one of the most intriguing and misunderstood in the spiritual world. They believe that the duality between good and evil, pure and impure, must be transcended to achieve true enlightenment. In contrast to other Hindu traditions that emphasize purification and renunciation of the material world, the Aghoris advocate that everything in existence is part of the divine and, therefore, must be fully accepted. For them, the path to liberation does not come from distancing oneself from the physical world, but from diving deeply into its essence. This understanding is reflected in their rituals, which often challenge societal taboos. By living among what most people consider impure, such as decaying bodies and the ashes of the dead, the Aghoris seek to completely eliminate attachment and fear, reaching a state of total acceptance of existence. The central concept of their philosophy is non-discrimination. According to their belief, everything in creation is a manifestation of Shiva, the god of destruction and transformation. If everything belongs to Shiva, then nothing can be considered unworthy or impure. This perspective leads them to challenge social norms, adopting habits and rituals that question ancient conventions, such as the caste system and traditional notions of spiritual purity. Another fundamental principle of the Aghoris is absolute detachment. They believe that the primary cause of human suffering is attachment to the ego, identity, and material possessions. For this reason, many of them live without a fixed home, wear only minimal clothing, or remain naked, and avoid any emotional ties that could bind them to the material world. To them, true freedom lies in letting go of everything, including their own bodies. Additionally, the Aghoris view death as a natural and inevitable process. While many cultures avoid discussing the end of life or approach death with fear, the Aghoris embrace it as a necessary transition in the cycle of existence. They believe that only by confronting death without repulsion can one be freed from the limitations imposed by the ego. Thus, they not only live near cremation sites but also cover their bodies with the ashes of the dead as a constant reminder of life's impermanence. The consumption of substances considered impure, such as human remains or bodily fluids, is not an act of barbarism but an extreme demonstration of detachment and acceptance of divinity in all its forms. For the Aghoris, the revulsion many feel toward these practices is merely a reflection of the social illusion that separates the sacred from the profane. Another significant aspect is their connection to altered states of consciousness. Many monks engage in intense meditation and even use natural substances, such as psychoactive plants, to reach a state of spiritual transcendence. Unlike recreational use, the Aghoris use these substances as tools to dissolve the barriers of the mind and attain a deeper understanding of the universe. Although their practices are often met with fear and distrust by much of society, the Aghoris do not seek approval or followers. To them, the spiritual journey is an individual path, where each person must find their own way to enlightenment. However, their philosophy raises profound questions. Is what we consider repulsive and impure truly so, or have we been conditioned to think that way? Could facing our deepest fears lead us to a broader understanding of existence? Above all, the philosophy of the Aghoris is an invitation to total acceptance of life. Instead of rejecting or fearing impermanence, they show us that embracing every aspect of existence without judgment may be the key to true liberation. On their journey to enlightenment and escape from the endless cycle of reincarnation, these monks follow radical practices that challenge deeply rooted social and religious beliefs. Unlike other Hindu traditions that seek purity through renunciation and isolation, the Aghoris believe that true liberation lies in the complete acceptance of the universe, without distinction between pure and impure. Varanasi, also known as Kashi or Benares, is considered the holiest city in Hinduism and one of the oldest continuously inhabited places in the world. Located on the banks of the Ganges River, this city is a spiritual epicenter where thousands of pilgrims come daily for purification rituals, prayers, and funeral cremations. What makes Varanasi unique is not just its antiquity or religious significance, but the way it naturally and symbiotically connects life and death. The city is filled with temples, narrow alleys, and an atmosphere steeped in mysticism. For Hindu devotees, dying in Varanasi is a privilege, as they believe that those who are cremated on the banks of the Ganges have the chance to escape the cycle of reincarnation and attain moksha, the ultimate spiritual liberation. This belief leads many elderly and terminally ill individuals to migrate to the city in their final days, waiting for their passage to the next world in one of the many spiritual hospices dedicated to this purpose. The ghats, staircases leading down to the river, are the beating heart of Varanasi. There are more than 80 of them, each serving a distinct purpose. Some are used for purification rituals, while others are dedicated to cremation ceremonies. The most well-known are Manikarnika Ghat and Harishchandra Ghat, where the fire never goes out and bodies are cremated day and night in an unbroken cycle of farewells and rebirths. For the Aghoris, Varanasi is the ideal place for their spiritual journey. Not only do they live among the cremation grounds, but they also see the city as a symbol of life's impermanence. Unlike other Hindu traditions that distance themselves from death and decay, the Aghoris embrace them as an essential part of existence. By meditating at the ghats and witnessing the transformation of the physical body into ashes, they reinforce their belief that attachment to the material world is an illusion and that everything ultimately returns to the divine source. Beyond its connection to death, Varanasi also nurtures a vibrant culture of spiritual practices, from grand ceremonies like the Ganga Aarti, performed every night in devotion to the river, to the chanting of mantras and the ringing of temple bells. This atmosphere of religious fervor creates a striking contrast between the chaos of the living world and the serenity found on the banks of the Ganges, where the Aghoris seek their enlightenment. Thus, Varanasi is not just a backdrop for the lives of the Aghoris, it is an integral part of their philosophy. The city teaches them daily that everything is temporary, that death is merely a transition, and that true liberation lies in the total acceptance of existence. For many, what happens in the cremation grounds may seem dark, but for the Aghoris, it is there that the essence of spirituality and the connection with the divine are found. Varanasi is the city where life and death intertwine in a unique way. On the banks of the sacred Ganges River, funeral rites are carried out continuously. Hindus from all over the country travel here with the hope that their ashes will be scattered in the river's waters, ensuring their spiritual liberation. But while many see the Ganges as a gateway to the afterlife, the Aghoris perceive it as a reflection of existence itself, where everything, from birth to decomposition, is part of the same divine unity. The Aghoris' relationship with death is one of the most radical and misunderstood aspects of their philosophy. For many cultures, death is a feared event, associated with the end of existence and the separation from the world of the living. However, for the Aghoris, death is not the end but an inevitable transition within the cycle of existence. Unlike most of society, which avoids any contact with lifeless bodies, these monks seek to understand and accept death as an essential part of the spiritual journey. By living near the cremation grounds of Varanasi, The Aghoris are constantly in contact with the reality of death. They observe the fire consuming bodies, turning them to ashes, and see in this process a reflection of life's impermanence. To them, the idea of impurity associated with corpses makes no sense, as everything in the universe is a manifestation of the divine. This understanding leads them to challenge cultural taboos by meditating among decomposing bodies, covering themselves with human ashes, and, in specific rituals, using skulls as sacred vessels. The use of human remains in their practices is not an act of morbidity or disrespect, but rather an extreme form of detachment. The Aghoris believe that by directly interacting with death, they can transcend fear and the illusion of the ego. This approach allows them to accept life and death as two sides of the same reality, without rejection or suffering. To them, true liberation happens when one understands that human identity is fleeting and that attachment to the physical body is one of the greatest obstacles to spiritual awakening. Furthermore, the Aghoris perform rituals involving human remains as part of their effort to eliminate the duality between the sacred and the profane. In their beliefs, nothing in the world is impure, and rejecting any aspect of existence would mean denying the very divinity present in everything. This view puts them in contrast with traditional society, which sees death as something to be avoided and cremation grounds as places of sorrow and loss. Another common practice among the Aghoris is deep meditation in cremation sites, where they spend hours or even days contemplating the cycle of life and death. During these periods, they seek to reach elevated states of consciousness in which the separation between the self and the universe disappears. For these monks, enlightenment does not come through denying the material world, but rather through the total acceptance of existence in all its forms. The Aghoris' relationship with death raises profound questions about how humanity deals with the end of life. While most people prefer to avoid the subject and create psychological barriers against the reality of death, the Aghoris confront it head-on, seeking in it a path to higher understanding. Their approach may seem extreme to many, but it invites us to reflect. Does the fear of death prevent us from truly living? By accepting the transience of existence, could we find a peace that few dare to seek? Regardless of how their rituals are interpreted, the Aghoris challenge one of humanity's greatest anxieties, the fear of the unknown. In their journey to transcend the limitations of the ego and achieve spiritual liberation, they teach us that death is not the opposite of life, but a natural continuation of an eternal cycle. While most devotees fear and avoid any contact with corpses, the Aghoris approach them in a ritualistic manner. They can be seen meditating among decomposing bodies, using skulls as sacred utensils, and even consuming human remains in specific rituals. To them, these acts are not morbid or insane, but an extreme way of eliminating fear and attachment to the physical body, accepting life's transience as a natural state of existence. The caste system in India is one of the oldest social structures in the world, dividing society into hierarchical groups based on birth and occupation. For centuries, this organization has determined not only people's social and economic roles, but also their spiritual position. However, the Aghoris completely defy this division, rejecting all forms of discrimination and breaking one of the biggest taboos of Indian society. Unlike other Hindu sects, the Aghoris do not believe that spiritual purity is linked to the caste into which a person is born. For them, all human beings are expressions of the same divinity and, therefore, should not be segregated. In their view, the idea of superiority or inferiority based on birth is an illusion created by the ego and reinforced by rigid social norms. The most radical manifestation of this belief can be seen in their coexistence with the so-called untouchables, or Dalits, who have historically been marginalized and relegated to occupations considered impure, such as handling corpses and waste. The Aghoris not only live among them but also share meals, rituals, and even spaces in cremation grounds. This behavior starkly contrasts with the dominant Hindu tradition, in which any contact with an untouchable can be seen as an act of impurity. Another significant aspect is the Aghoris' rejection of gender segregation norms. While many religious traditions impose restrictions on women, especially during menstruation, the Aghoris make no distinction between men and women in their spiritual practices. In their understanding, feminine energy is just as sacred as masculine energy, and any form of restriction based on gender is a reflection of human ignorance. Breaking away from the caste system can also be seen as an act of social resistance. Although caste-based discrimination has been formally abolished by the Indian Constitution, its roots remain deeply embedded in the country's culture and daily life. By explicitly challenging the structure, the Aghori not only question traditional spiritual beliefs but also cast a critical light on the social inequalities that still persist. For this reason, the Aghori are often viewed with suspicion and even hostility by those who strictly follow conventional Hindu norms. Their presence and practices can be unsettling to those who have been taught to avoid everything considered impure. However, their philosophy raises a fundamental question. To what extent are our beliefs about purity, morality, and social hierarchy truly spiritual, rather than cultural constructs imposed over time? By breaking away from the caste system, the Aghori not only challenge a millennia-old tradition but also offer a radically egalitarian perspective on spirituality. For them, true liberation cannot be found in separation and exclusion, but rather in the unconditional acceptance of all forms of existence. The Aghori, despite their reclusive lifestyle and extreme spiritual practices, are not entirely disconnected from the outside world. Unlike other ascetics who isolate themselves in caves or distant temples, many Aghori walk among the living, interact with pilgrims, and share their teachings with those seeking to understand their philosophy. This interaction provokes curiosity, fear, and, in some cases, even respect. Another intriguing aspect of the Aghori's interaction with modern society is their perspective on materialism and the relentless pursuit of status and wealth. In an increasingly consumerist world, where a person's identity is often defined by their possessions, the Aghori challenge this paradigm by completely rejecting material belongings. To them, the true value of life lies in experience and the complete acceptance of existence, rather than in accumulating wealth or social status. This philosophy is also reflected in their attitude toward human suffering. The Aghori make no distinctions between social classes and are often seen helping those whom society has abandoned, such as the sick, lepers, and the homeless. To them, every human being is a manifestation of the divine and deserves respect and compassion, regardless of their social or physical condition. However, their way of life sparks controversy. Many Indians, even deeply religious ones, consider their practices repulsive and contrary to the principles of conventional Hinduism. Furthermore, in modern times, with the advancement of science and the increasing secularization of society, the Aghori's worldview seems even more distant from the reality of most people. As society moves toward a world dominated by technology and scientific logic, the Aghori continue to follow a tradition that dates back millennia, rooted in the total acceptance of the unknown and the direct experimentation of existence. Nevertheless, their beliefs force us to reflect on some of humanity's central dilemmas. What does freedom truly mean? To what extent are our beliefs about morality, purity, and impurity merely social constructs rather than universal truths? Does our fear and aversion to the unknown prevent us from better understanding reality? Regardless of how we perceive them, the Aghori remain one of the most radical examples of detachment and absolute acceptance. To them, the secret of existence does not lie in denying what frightens us but in fully embracing it. Their message may not be comfortable, but it compels us to question what it truly means to live unbound and without fear of what lies beyond human comprehension. For modern society, their practices may seem extreme, but is there not something revealing in their philosophy? What if the true path to freedom is not in fleeing the darkness, but in fully embracing everything that exists? The journey of the Aghori leads us to a deep reflection on the concepts of purity, fear, and acceptance. While most societies build barriers between the sacred and the profane, the pure and the impure, these monks challenge such divisions, seeing unity in all things. Their philosophy may seem extreme, but does it not reveal a truth we often avoid facing? The central idea of the Aghori is that spiritual liberation can only be achieved when we overcome our predetermined conceptions and accept life and death as parts of the same cycle. While many shy away from thoughts of death, the Aghori embrace it, viewing it as a teacher that imparts lessons on impermanence and the illusion of the ego. This detachment from materialism and social identity is one of the defining aspects of their existence. In the modern world, where fear of the unknown is often avoided, the Aghori's philosophy presents itself as an invitation to self-discovery and the transcendence of limitations imposed by dogmas and conventions. In a society where the pursuit of status and security dominates daily life, the Aghoris challenge this perspective by demonstrating that true freedom lies in the complete acceptance of what is, without judgment or aversion. Moreover, their break with the caste system compels us to question whether social divisions are truly justified or merely cultural conventions upheld by fear of change. They show that spiritual equality should not be defined by birth or occupation, but by the understanding that all human beings are expressions of the same divine reality. But how prepared are we to face this vision? Are our notions of morality and purity truly universal, or are they just reflections of social conditioning? The Aghoris remind us that the boundaries we create are artificial, and that the true path to spiritual liberation may lie in the unconditional acceptance of all manifestations of existence. Regardless of how they are perceived by society, the Aghoris continue their solitary journey, challenging the limits of human perception and reminding us that true enlightenment may be found where we least expect it. Perhaps by confronting our own fears and questioning our certainties, we may catch a glimpse of the freedom they so relentlessly pursue. If this philosophy teaches us anything, it is that life and death, the sacred and the profane, are merely two sides of the same coin. What remains is for us to decide whether we are ready to embrace this reality and live without fear, or if we will continue to be bound by the comforting illusions that also limit us. Is what we consider impure or unacceptable truly a universal truth, or merely a social construct? Could it be that by facing our deepest fears, we might discover a form of freedom we never imagined? No matter how we perceive them, these monks continue their silent journey, challenging human perception and reminding us that, in the end, we are all part of the same eternal cycle of existence. What do you think of this perspective? Could wisdom be found in what we fear the most? We hope this journey through the mysteries of the fascinating Aghoris monks has been as thrilling for you as it has been for us. And considering the effort it takes to create these videos, we'd love for you to leave us a like and a comment. It's the best way to support us and help us keep bringing you top quality content every week. If you enjoyed this video and haven't subscribed yet, don't wait any longer. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss the fascinating videos we produce every week. Just like this one, you can now watch more content about some of the most incredible places on the planet. Don't miss this opportunity to explore the wonders these and many other destinations have to offer.